Hello, everybody. My name is Philip Kilbridge. I am NatureBridge's president and CEO, and just delighted to have you here this evening. And we're going to have about 300, 400 folks videoing in from across the country. For those of you not looking at the chat window, oh my gosh, we got folks who are going on the Appalachian Trail. We've got folks who've been traveling all over Utah. We've got people from Hayward, California, Columbia River Gorge in Portland, Oregon, Mount Tamalpais, Grand Canyon. So certainly we've got incredible national park lovers from across this country who are joining us tonight. So thank you for using that chat button. We're going to have a 45-minute program this evening, and I want to thank you all so much for joining us for our second Campfire Chat. Many of you were here in May when had the chance to interview Dr. Steve Lockhart, the Chief Medical Officer of Sutter Health. That was an outstanding conversation. If you love that, tonight it's double the intellect, double the fun with Cicely Muldoon and Nooshin Razani, and we'll get to them shortly. I want to thank so sincerely our partners who have made tonight possible. So our long-term friends at the Yosemite Conservancy who are help sponsoring tonight's event, our friends at Clean Canteen, the Mariposa County Bureau of Tourism, who's letting us know Yosemite National Park and the area is just a beautiful place to visit, explore, and discover, and of course our friends at Sierra Design. So thanks to all of you for helping make tonight happen. I'd love to show you a quick look at who NatureBridge is for those of you who are joining a NatureBridge event for the very first time. So why don't we go ahead and roll that video, Corey?
Yesterday, we went to school like a normal day, but it wasn't a normal day.
We went hiking on Mount Storm King up 2,280 feet.
There was a lot of times when we acted like we were scientists pretty much the whole day.
We tested the pH in the water, the dissolved oxygen, and the carbon dioxide.
I saw salamanders that I've never seen before. I've seen frogs, water striders, amazing cave systems.
Outside, you're in the wilderness, learning about the wilderness. You're seeing it. You're feeling it. In the classroom, you can't physically understand it. You could only mentally understand it.
They're bonding with each other. They're doing investigations. They're in the environment that hopefully they're learning to protect as they get older.
I realized what humans have done to Earth and how if we were just a little bit more friendly to the environment, we would see more of this everywhere.
Knowing the beauty of nature really makes me want to preserve it, and I want future generations to know how amazing and intriguing nature is as well.
So for those of you who are new to NatureBridge, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight. We are an almost 50-year organization started in Yosemite National Park that is dedicating to helping students from across this country, and in fact across the globe, discover and learn in America's epic national parks. And while this pandemic and COVID-19 has burst onto the scene over the last 6 months, that's clearly deeply impacted our program, which is quite a paradox. I mean, that never have kids needed access to outdoor spaces, chances for social emotional learning, chances to discover and learn with their peers in national parks like Olympic and Prince William Forest Park and Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and of course, our birthplace in Yosemite. So we're not doing the programs that we love to do, that we live to do, that our educators strive to do all the time. But we are dedicated and committed to coming back stronger than ever after this pandemic ends. And in the meantime, we have pivoted to distance learning. We're partnering with about 600 schools across the country this year, helping to achieve their next generation science standards, to help students from all 50 states explore these incredible national parks from a distance, hopefully inspiring them to join us in person. Tonight, we are welcomed by incredible panelists, and I'm going to just give you a quick introduction. Dr. Nooshin Razani, she's the founder and director of the Center for Nature and Health at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital. She's an associate professor of epidemiology and pediatrics at University of California, San Francisco. In addition to her nature prescription program, she's currently conducting a review of outdoor transmission of respiratory viruses infections, including COVID-19. So how timely is that? We're also joined by Superintendent Cicely Muldoon. She's the acting superintendent of Yosemite National Park, a little known and scarcely visited national park in California. She's a 34-year veteran of the National Park Service, having served in parks across this nation. She also simultaneously serves as the superintendent of Point Reyes National Seashore. So Cicely superintendents Seashores by the Seashell. I'm not quite sure that I got that. She took up the helm in Yosemite this past January. So please, thank you for joining us tonight. Nooshin and Cicely, if you'll take yourselves off of mute and put yourselves on video, we can see you live. Welcome.
Thanks, Phil.
A bad tongue twister. Sorry about that. Welcome. I want to make sure that we use another function, which is a poll. And just to get a sense of our audience, how many of you have actually been to Yosemite National Park? So let's put that up on screen. So hopefully you can depress one of these if you are live on video. Have you been to Yosemite National Park? Yes, not yet, never heard of it. Wow, we've already got 78% of you having voted. We're going to close the voting down any moment now. Why don't we go ahead and share that? So 82% of you absolutely have been to Yosemite National Park, and 18% of you are making it your next national park visit. So we are surrounded by good friends this evening. So something that's on a lot of people's minds, Nooshin and Cicely, are the wildfires in the West. And Nooshin, you're in Oakland, California. Cicely, you're in Yosemite National Park. Tell me what it's like where you are. How are fires and smoke impacting you?
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here. I love NatureBridge and I really love Yosemite, so I feel so lucky to be here. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, it's been such a stressful time since the pandemic started, and nature and the outdoors was one of the few places that was open to families to recreate, especially families that were working and had kids at home and there was no school. So I think the fires just were a real kind of sock in the gut because then you lost the one thing that was open. I actually think that people were I was shocked and awed at nature and just the grandiosity of what can happen. And I think it really brought home to a lot of people that if we don't take care of the earth, it's not going to be okay. I really think that there was a little bit of an awakening on a mass scale because like you need air. There's just no way around it. And we didn't have air for a while. Although I think it's worse out in Yosemite right now. We were up in the 200s in Oakland and it was pretty hard.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that body blow. It has definitely been a body blow over all these last months with COVID, and the wildfire smoke right now is sort of the cherry on top of 2020, let me just say. About 45 minutes ago, we closed Yosemite National Park. I hope for a very short time because our air quality here today all over the park has been exceeding 700 AQI, which is, we've all been suffering from wildfire smoke, but this is sort of off the charts since so many of you have been to Yosemite. As I look out my window right now, normally I could see Half Dome and look up towards Yosemite Falls, and you can't even see the walls of the valley right now. So it's a pretty dark day here in Yosemite, and this is the highlight of my day. I want to echo what Dr. Razani said. Thank you so much, NatureBridge, for what you do. One of the great joys of being here is seeing kids in nature every day, except today.
Well, we couldn't be more honored to have you as a partner, Cicely, and Dr. Razani. You're going to share a little bit of a story of your connection to NatureBridge later on, but the inspiration behind your work. Maybe you can tell us, actually, Dr. Razani, a little bit about the research that's being done at your center, just so folks get a sense of what you're studying. How is this manifesting?
Sure. I mean, we started around 5 years ago with a randomized trial of park prescriptions. And it's still a pretty bold thing to say, but when we did it, it was really bold. The thought that instead of a medicine, what you really need is to spend quality time with your family and friends out in nature. And so we did that study, and were able to show that just having a physician speak to families about the importance of being outdoors together inspired behavior change, as well as a whole host of health benefits that I can get into. Building on that, at this point right now, we have pivoted a little to work on COVID. And so we are running 2 studies to try to understand how the SARS-CoV-2 virus behaves outdoors and how transmission works outdoors, which I can get into. And then in addition, we're doing a study on nature and joy, where we're just talking to people about how and where they find joy. Right now, I happen to work with a patient base that is low income, and so we're really trying to figure out where nature fits into life now. And then finally, we're designing an intervention for pediatric anxiety using nature.
So, Cicely, you are surrounded by nature. You're surrounded by one of our most amazing national parks. Can you talk a little bit about how Dr. Razani, Nooshin's research manifests itself in the field, in the park?
Yeah, you bet. I think the intersection of public health and nature is absolutely undeniable, and we see proof of it every day here in Yosemite. One of the small silver linings of COVID is that our visitor center, we've altered our operations some this summer to keep employees safe. So our visitor center moved outside, and when I open my window, I can hear the rangers all day long swearing in junior rangers. And we see it all day long and every day here. And just the joy and wonder on kids' faces and on families' faces when they finally get out of the house, for one thing, for COVID, and get to a place like Yosemite is, it's just off the charts, immeasurable.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, the 14,000 NatureBridge students who have that chance to get off the bus every year, whether from the Bay Area or Sacramento or Los Angeles or from any of 26 states across the country. It's getting to see that. And that's, of course, a great pain and challenge right now, is not being able to do that. Dr. Razani, you referenced this earlier, and I want to bring it back, is talking about the measurable benefits. Like, are we able to measure through real data and science the positive outcomes of those interventions, of that nature RX?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. More and more in medicine and public health, we're really learning, first of all, that just where you live and where you play, where you grow, can have a huge impact on health outcomes. And so there's 2 ways to really measure the health benefits of nature. One is on a population level, across a large population. What are the benefits of living in and near nature? And nature, green space, blue space, if you're talking about water. I've even heard yellow space talking about sand, but they've all been linked to things ranging from low birth weight babies, preterm labor, maternal hypertension, to things in childhood like myopia, whether you wear glasses or not, obesity, attention span. This is all childhood outcomes. And then in teens and adults, there's a lot of work on mental health, very actually convincing work. And all the way through to, in the elderly, things that have to do with cognition. And actually, most convincing to me is just mortality. If you live around nature, you live longer. And that's at all income levels. So in the United States, sometimes that is actually a measure of affluence and also of segregation. because nature is not equitably distributed in all neighborhoods. And so we tease some of that out in our research. The other thing, so that's the population level, how you can measure it. And I hope I'm not going into too much detail. You shouldn't ask me about my research because then I get into, but you know.
Keep asking about your research.
Okay, but then the next way we measure this is what happens when you take one individual from their urban life or even a rural life and you put them into the wilderness, or in my case, into their neighborhood park. And you can even measure a lot of outcomes in those small experiments as well. And the things that we think of as like soft outcomes, like love or friendship or relationships, they have a huge impact on health. And so we measured things like stress, and you can try to get technical with cortisol, which we did, or you can just ask people how stressed they are, loneliness, and then I'm very interested in relationships, especially between parents and children. And so we can measure those things, and they do have very real health consequences.
I need to do a touch of housekeeping, and then I want to ask a poll question, which is, if we're using the chat button, you can pull down, and if you're going to put something in there, please pull it down so it can say all panelists and all attendees. That way everyone can see it, because there's actually a very rich dialogue going on that only Nooshin, Cicely, and I can see. So, so if you want to do that. And the question I'm going to ask you to put in the chat button is, what are the benefits to you, those of you who are on the video tonight, of access to NatureBridge, just so we get a sense of how you experience it. And Nooshin, I'm so powerfully touched by that. There's books like Nature Deficit Disorder, and other incredible research that talks about not just kids spending so much time on screens and technology, but kids who just don't even have access, not out their back door. And I love what you are working on so hard is, how can you access 2 parks, 2 green spaces within walking distance on a bus, that it doesn't need to be the big Y park of Yosemite or Yellowstone, that you can get those positive benefits of nature nearby, and everybody deserves that. That should be a human right. So just so appreciate you continuing to be a champion. So folks are putting into the chat button, stress relief and losing weight and disconnecting from technology, and just love what people are putting into the chat window on their benefits. I also want to throw,
I want to throw out there that we talk a lot about children needing play, but everyone needs play. And so a big part of nature is just the unstructured play. And that's why it's such a rich landscape for human brain development, because it has an infinity of possibilities of what you can do. And so during this time, I want to remind everyone that there's no perfect nature, and you can play always, and you can always play with your family. And I'm really working, and I hope you guys can help me to really redefine nature in a way that people feel like they have access to it now. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, please, I think people appreciate that much more than me interrupting anybody else. I want to talk about something that was more topical and will be topical again this weekend, because I just got a lot of questions as we knew Cicely was going to be on the video tonight. Cicely, as COVID hit, Yosemite National Park actually shut down to visitors for some extended period of time. And a lot of people are asking, what was it like in the park, particularly with the wildlife? And I think we may even have a video that we'll queue up, but can you talk a little bit about what it was like being there, very alone?
It was an extraordinary time to be here, really. On one hand, it was sort of like zombie apocalypse. You'd walk through Yosemite Village and there was nobody there. So that just felt all wrong. The NatureBridge kids weren't here. You didn't see rangers walking around in flat hats. We didn't see families, but we did see some things like this. At the end of every workday, the workdays were filled with crazy planning for COVID operations, but at the end of the workday, I'd go for a walk around the meadow. Most of you have been to Yosemite, you might recognize this. This is Cook's Meadow. And the bears were pretty comfortable with the park being closed. I have to say, they were out in force and casually wandering around both the meadows like this and on the roads themselves because there was so little traffic in the park. So it was kind of an extraordinary moment in time that Yosemite hasn't experienced for a long time. With luck, I actually won't experience again quite in that way because it was a great joy to reopen and have people enjoy the park again, I have to say.
It makes me think, I mean, I've had the chance to go to Yosemite all times of year, and you go there during waterfall season or in the height of June. It's like the Times Square of the National Park Service. Everybody's there with their cameras. But something that I love about the NatureBridge student opportunities is we have students going in December, in January, when it's so much quieter, or we have them not just in the Valley, but up at our Crane Flat campus or in the future at the National Environmental Science Center. So making sure that they see the whole of Yosemite National Park and not just that, you know, those epic camera shots of
yeah.
Half
I'll
Dome.
tell you what, the soundscape was really extraordinary because I didn't realize how loud our shuttle buses were that run by all the time and that are really important to get people around the valley. No shuttle buses, very little traffic. What you could hear were the waterfalls and the wind and the bird song, and you heard some of that in that video. It was pretty extraordinary.
Nooshin, so we were talking about air quality index earlier, and for those of you who are joining the video late, as of 5 p.m. today, the AQI in Yosemite National Park is 700. They have shut the park down for at least a few days as we see if the smoke clears out. And as Cicely was telling me earlier, I never say this, but you don't want to be in Yosemite right now. You don't want to be stuck inside in Yosemite. So we're all thinking about air quality and what we're breathing, particularly on the West Coast. But a big question on everybody's mind is COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and is it safe to recreate outdoors? How is the advice and counsel evolving at this point? And if you could spend a few moments talking about particularly about kids.
Sure. I mean, I think it's really interesting because I spent most of my work to date thinking about the outdoors for preventive health, things like, you know, chronic illness. But it turns out that being outdoors may actually be an intervention for an acute infectious disease. The way that most scientists think that coronavirus is spread is through large droplets that travel around about 6 feet. And so being outdoors allows people to distance farther. It allows for air ventilation. It means that there's usually higher temperature, higher humidity, and more UV, all of which are known to help kill the virus if it does land on a surface. You know, it is also better for personal health and well-being, which may help you fight off the illness. So there are a lot of reasons why being outdoors can help stop the transmission of this virus. And I say that because it's important to remember that coronavirus is spread by human beings, not by the outdoors. And so the key when you're outdoors is to have distance, to be masked, and I think those are the two main things. And if you do those things, it can be safe. If you don't do those things, though, it is being demonstrated that the outdoor advantage, if you call it, can definitely be overrun. I mean, there was a 10-day motorcycle event in South Dakota that was outdoors, and it's turned out to be one of the biggest super spreading events in history. And there were overnight components, so people were also indoors, but that event did not have much masking and was very densely packed. So I think if you are densely packed and you're not wearing masks, the virus can definitely spread outdoors, but short of that, being outdoors is safer than being indoors.
Thank you. I want to bring the audience back into the conversation and point out two things. One is there should be a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions that you'd like to tee up for Nooshin or Cicely, you can put those there, because I'm going to sort of turn it over to the audience in a few minutes. The other thing to bring you all in is on the chat button. And again, if you could go ahead and chat to not just all panelists, but all panelists and attendees. There's no right answer to this. But would you rather spend a weekend in Yosemite or 3 hours a day across an entire month in your favorite local park, just to get a sense of how people think about recreating and what brings them true joy. And we'll let those answers come up. Local park, Yosemite. My guess is for those of you who have never been to Yosemite, you might put that towards the top of the list. And it's really not an either or question, as a few of you are pointing out. So thanks to those of you who are putting the Q&A in there. Nooshin, can you talk just a little bit about your patients? Who are your patients? How, what are you fighting for them? How did they inspire you to continue your great leadership and work?
Well, my patients reflect the amazing beauty and diversity of the United States, of California, and of Oakland. I mean, they really represent the global village. I see people that speak many different languages and have many different traditions of connecting with nature. And so I'm very inspired by the stories of memories in nature, of games people played in nature as children, and really the understanding that the love of ecosystem is part of the human condition and the love of biodiversity. If, I'm trying to figure out how to define nature exactly, but it exists in all of us. It happens that I work in a medical center that is available to people regardless of income. So we serve a lot of low-income families. And I would say that the situation is pretty heartbreaking right now. And I know that sometimes people like to put nature in the optional category of recreation and kind of say, well, if you need food, you might not care about nature. That's not my experience. My experience is that everybody wants rest and solace and peace of mind, and that actually access to nature in our context is really a housing issue. And so low-income families may not have access to nature, but that is actually one of their essential issues because they don't have access to stable housing or a yard or a neighborhood that has trees in it. So I think, I feel as always very motivated to fight for the right to be in nature, and also so supportive of organizations like yours that take people into nature.
Thank you, Nooshin, and I'm going to use that as a bit of a segue, because I do think that a lot of people who are lifetime advocates for parks and for the outdoors tend to have had a transformative, or maybe multiple transformative experiences in outdoors, and it really is about that access, and it's about that availability, and it's not just about families that prioritize it, it's that families that have the privilege to prioritize it. So just continuing to make sure, and we said this before, it should be a right, that access to nature, and it is so intersected with housing and so many other questions. And I want to get personal with both of you. Maybe Cicely, I don't know, would you mind telling me about yourself as a kid? What were experiences that you had and enjoyed in outdoors that has led to this 34-year career with the National Park Service, and now leading what many consider the most outstanding national park in the country?
Well, they're all outstanding national parks for sure, but I was totally one of the lucky ones based on that conversation we were just having. I did have access. My folks were not particularly outdoorsy, but they, after World War II, they moved from Omaha, Nebraska to the San Francisco Bay Area. And from there, where I grew up, I could walk into the GGNRA, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. So that was really my backyard as a kid. And it wouldn't even occur to me that that wouldn't be what people would do for fun, is go out and run around in the hills and have a good time. And I didn't know how lucky I had that kind of access. And then I went to a high school where, as everyone has had, I had a very inspirational high school biology teacher who took kids on NatureBridge-like trips all the time, backpacking and river rafting. In fact, my first 2 backpacking trips were in Point Reyes and then in Yosemite. And I later got to work in both parks. So it was an absolute direct link between access as a kid to these spaces and a career in the national parks.
So that's amazing. And you talked about, had similar NatureBridge-like experiences. And Nooshin, typically at these events, we love to bring a student or an alumnus onto screen to talk about how NatureBridge impacted them. But maybe you can tell us about a similar experience that you may have had growing up.
Yes, I'm a NatureBridge alumni. I'm proud of it. um, well, I grew up, I spent some years in Iran, and nature was definitely a big part of my culture. But then we moved to Los Angeles when I was 5. And I went to an amazing elementary school, Culver City, Linwoody Howe, if anyone out there is from Culver City. And in 5th grade, we raised money to go to Yosemite. And it was such an amazing experience just to even work on the fundraising. But so I'm going to tell my story because Philip told me I could, but I want to preface it by saying that actually my parents are very cool people, but they were new to the United States, and the thought of me going with strangers to stay in a tent was a little bit unusual to them. So they actually said I could not go on the trip, and it was very heartbreaking. But my mom, being the rebel that she was, kind of finagled it so that I could go on the trip, and she followed in the car with my stepdad, so that my real dad, complicated story, but so that he would think that I wasn't going alone. And so I got to come on the trip, and she hid so that the other kids wouldn't know that I actually had somebody there with me. But I think this is a picture from near that time, of me and my little brother. I think I got to get away and see him. But besides that, like, family anecdote, I mean, I see a lot of questions about the difference between local nature and transformative nature or wilderness. But I want to say that seeing Yosemite when I was 9, it was like falling in love. It was like, it was so grand, and it had such a big impact on me. There was a slideshow about Mono Lake that was given, and I think that I committed my life to nature based on that slideshow in 9th grade. And then they sang a song, Dirt Made My Lunch. I still sing that song to my kids, and I learned that on my NatureBridge trip in 5th grade. And so I think Yosemite and spaces like that are sacred for everyone, and all kids should see it at least once. Somebody's saying to sing it, but I think you guys should sing it. I'm not going to sing it if the superintendent of Yosemite is here.
Oh, come on.
No, you have to. You guys have to sing it, not me.
It's so funny. One of our alums, I mean, we've got 1 million alums across the country, and we're just so honored, Dr. Razani, that you were inspired by NatureBridge, and it became a small part of your story moving forward. We're lucky that Mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti, is an alum as well. And maybe as a follow-up, Annie, to everybody on this video, we could share that clip of him singing a fantastic song that he learned at NatureBridge that he did on film for us. Shameless and wonderful politicians that love to tell great stories. So maybe we'll save both of you the terror of having to do it live and show a video of somebody different. I'm going to go ahead and go to the Q&A function and remind folks that you can put a question into Q&A, but also look through and put thumbs up on questions that you like, and those will rise to the top of the list. And I'm going to go with the first question from Lowell Kleinman. Is there anything like your center for adults? Lowell's a palliative care physician and absolutely sees the potential benefits.
There are, well, first of all, we do research not just on pediatrics, but there's a Center for Health and Nature in Texas. And I know they're doing some adult studies on congestive heart failure and other more adult-related outcomes. there's also, I would say, a center of excellence in at Washington University in Seattle. And there's also a center for the built environment and nature at Harvard. And Europe has quite a few researchers. I think the niche that we fill is the clinical application, but there are other hotspots. And I'm happy to help connect that doctor to those hotspots.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Nooshin. Cicely, I'm not sure that you have an answer to this, but how has the smoke, although the question could just as easily be asked, how have past fires impacted wildlife? I'm not sure what you know about that. We know that it's impacted the human wildlife a bit.
Gosh, I really don't know the answer to that question. I think it must impact all living, breathing beings because the air quality is super difficult right now. But that's a fantastic question. We close the park to visitors and to people coming in, but we can't close the park to wildlife, of course.
Crystal asks, are either of you aware of any research or science that supports how nature can improve creativity and collaboration within diverse groups of people, particularly as it relates to adults?
The person that does some of the creativity research is David Strayer in Utah. And he's the person that actually put wires on people's heads in nature. And he showed that the tipping point for really maximal creativity was after 72 hours or 3 days unplugged in wilderness. And so he does a lot of really great work. And then the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley has done work on human connection and human bonding in nature. And they did a river rafting experiment where they showed that oxytocin within the little rafts increased. And oxytocin is the love hormone. And so people that rafted down a river together had more oxytocin than before.
We were so lucky that he was the keynote speaker for an Evening on the Lake event that we had up in Seattle in support of our work in Olympic National Park, and just phenomenal, really outstanding work. So thank you for all the keep coming in. I'm going to try and find a Cicely question.
I like those Dr. Razani questions.
No, you should answer them from your experiences.
Right. I mean, do you have any sort of non-medically related answers to those, Cicely?
Or how do you see creativity improving in Yosemite?
Well, I have no science around it, but it just seems so empirical. It seems empirical in what you see on visitors' faces and how you watch kids. I'll go back to our junior ranger program, kind of work their way through that, and go and get their badge and get sworn in. What you see families doing, it's just it's kind of a palpable, I think I probably said this earlier, but there's a palpable sense of joy that emanates from people of all ages, I will say. You really see it in kids because kids have no filters, but you see it in people of all ages here and in other national parks and frankly in other open spaces. Yosemite kind of has the wow factor of these phenomenal landscape, but I think access to any kind of green space is just critical, both for on a couple of fronts, both for our own health, for human health. I think every civilization in history has a deep connection to nature, and when we're cut off from that, we're poorer for it, and ultimately the planet is poorer for it because it's people who are going to take care of these special places. So it's the full package of making people healthy and making the planet healthy by spending time in national parks and other open spaces.
Cicely, I see a question here that is directed at me, but I'm going to give an answer, and then I'd love if you would give some thoughts on it. The question that Lynn asks is, will NatureBridge be able to have its in-person Yosemite programs for students in 2021? And I talked about the impact of COVID-19 on our programs, and I want to be really clear. We have an outstanding risk management program for our kids, and anytime you take kids away from home, anytime you put kids in a bus and have them out in an epic national park, you have to manage risk, and we have an outstanding track record of doing so. one of the primary things that's preventing us from having programs is that schools aren't happening. I mean, our clients are of course kids, but it's the schools that bring those students with them. And when schools are not in person, and if they are in person, they're certainly not allowing field trips at this moment. They're just, it doesn't allow for us to have our programs. We are going to test our risk management procedures in a really, really thoughtful way and an outstanding way with the support of Yosemite National Park as soon as this smoke clears up by having weekend family camps up at our Crane Flat campus. That'll be a small way for us to welcome kids and their families to Yosemite National Park, and that'll be in October and into November. And you know, we think we've got all the answers in place to help make sure that that is a risk managed scenario, particularly around COVID-19. And with that builds more confidence for our in-person programs over time. But a lot depends on not NatureBridge, it depends on schools, it depends on managing the virus, it depends on masking and other things. Cicely, I don't know, do you have any sort of thoughts or thinking on that? You only get a veto vote, but do you have any ideas or thoughts?
I would just echo what you said, Phil. We want NatureBridge and everyone like you back here as soon as possible, because I think it's just so important to get back into the parks. All of our decisions, as all of NatureBridge's are all predicated around the virus right now and being sure we're doing everything we can to keep folks safe. But with luck, 2020 will be in our rearview mirror before too much longer, and we can reopen in a much more meaningful way. And I will echo that NatureBridge has an outstanding risk management program. We evaluate a lot of these, and NatureBridge is all over this. They take their responsibilities of getting kids here safely very, very seriously.
So one of the things that I was reminded of the last time we did a campfire chat is just because people stay on the video does not mean that they actually don't want the program to end on time. So we are going to end at 6:45 Pacific time, which is just in 3 minutes. And I'd love, Nooshin, any final words? Cicely, any final words? And then I'll wrap this up for everybody.
I guess just I have raised my 3 children to love nature, and so their question to me when they each turned around like 11 was, so what do I do now? Because, you know, we're telling them that to love nature, but at the same time they see nature in distress. And so I hope we can all hold their hearts and also empower them to really be involved in environmental stewardship. It's my last note.
Okay. I'll echo that sentiment. One other thought, I'm completely distracted by this banana slug song I see. I must learn the words to that, but I will just echo what Dr. Razani said. These places are incredibly important for human health, and likewise, they're incredibly important for the health of the planet and for sustaining species and ecosystems. So I just want to thank NatureBridge for the work you do and for everybody on this call, because you wouldn't be on a call like this if you didn't share these sentiments about the just incredible importance of a healthy planet. So thank you all, and come back to Yosemite soon. I hope this smoke clears.
And nobody give up. Stay happy.
Well, a huge thanks to Dr. Razani and to Superintendent Muldoon for joining us tonight, for making this campfire chat happen. If you would like to have future campfire chats, go ahead and put in the chat window somebody you think would be outstanding for us to interview, or maybe a theme. And I should say, Dr. Razani was supposed to be our keynote speaker at our in-person gala this past May, and when of course that got canceled due to COVID-19, I sent her a list of 20 people that I would pair her with. And I won't tell you the 19 that didn't make the cut, but she said, Cicely Muldoon, that's the one I want. So I'm just so delighted that we could get you two connected tonight. I also want to thank our sponsors. So you see it on the screen: Clean Canteen, Sierra Designs, the Yosemite Conservancy, and the Yosemite Mariposa County Tourism Bureau. So thank you all for making this happen. And if you'd like to learn more about NatureBridge, please do. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that relies on community support. We're at naturebridge.org. And with that, thank you everybody, and have a safe and wonderful evening.